The Glorious Revolution took place in England in the late 17th century, beginning in 1688 and lasting into 1689. Ruling England, Scotland, and Ireland at the time was King James II, a Catholic ruler who was losing support as he appeared to be forcing Catholicism on a growingly Protestant England. In response to the threat of the Catholic monarch, King James II's opponents contacted his Protestant daughter Mary and her husband William and offered the pair the right to rule England, which they both happily accepted. On November 5, 1688, William and 14,000 soldiers landed on the Devon shore, and by December of 1688, King James II had fled from London to France. William and Mary took over with a victory that was almost bloodless. The crown was officially offered to William and Mary in early 1689. The enactment of the English Bill of Rights followed almost immediately afterwards. Pictured on the screen is a painting of William and his soldiers as they landed to take over as the new monarch. This is an interesting topic, as the Glorious Revolution was a movement that overthrew an existing monarch with practically no bloodshed. It showed a powerful parliament that was able to choose whom they wanted as a monarch if they believed the current ruler was not leading the country towards its best interests. It established the supremacy of Parliament as a permanent role in government, as well as being involved in economic matters. It was a revolution in all sense of the word, as the country's leader was overthrown and replaced, and a new style of governance was enacted with the English Bill of Rights, but the revolution itself had very little violence. It is one of the few times that we see a practically peaceful transition of power from one monarch to another, without the previous monarch being disposed of. It also led to the English Bill of Rights that granted more liberties to the people. Pictured on the left is King James of England, and on the right is King William and Queen Mary as they represented the creation of the English Bill of Rights. The Glorious Revolution enhanced the credibility of the state and began the rise of England's economic and military power. But it was also the beginning of revolutionary ideas throughout the globe. In the English colonies in America, rebellions and insurrections began to take place in areas such as Massachusetts and Carolina. In April 1689, colonists in Massachusetts had begun to rebel against the Dominion of New England, and by August, they were revolting against Lord Baltimore, the governor from England. Places like Virginia were reverting to their original forms of government, such as the House of Burgesses. Colonists were inspired by the overthrowing of King James, and they began their own revolutionary ideas to be locally governed in the form that they chose. The Glorious Revolution had an impact on countries other than just England and her colonies. Scotland had an impact from the Glorious Revolution as well, as William and Mary had assumed that when they took over England, Scotland would follow, as would Ireland. Many of the Scots did not initiate the revolution, but they gladly accepted it as it came. Those that had been exiled from Scotland and had resettled in the Netherlands returned when they heard about the upcoming revolution, and they prepared for William's invasion. The Presbyterians in Scotland were thrilled about the Glorious Revolution and the overthrowing of King James, and they viewed it as a literal godsend and the source of divine right, seeing William and Mary as instruments of God to free them from the spreading Catholicism. They were emboldened by the change in leadership, and anti-Catholic demonstrations took place throughout Scotland. However, that does not mean everyone was thrilled about the revolution. The Episcopal nobles in Scotland were reluctant to accept William and Mary, and they remained loyal to King James, even after he had fled from the monarchy to France. This is why William was advised and decided to follow through with calling a meeting of the estates on March 14, 1689, and to hold elections for the offices so long as they were Protestant. There were a few rebellions by those who continued to support King James, even though he was no longer the king. These were the Jacobites who tried to rebel against King William. However, by May of 1689, William and Mary accepted the Scottish throne as well as the English, and they established Presbyterianism throughout the country and granted the Scottish Parliament more power. In France, after fleeing from London, James II and the Stuart royal family lived at the Château de Saint-Germain in Anlay, which was near Paris, as the guests of Louis XIV. King James died in 1701, and his son, the would have been King James III, was expelled from France at the request of the British government a few years later. However, during his time there, music became an important part of his court, as King James and his wife were both supporters of musicians. Few of the musicians under King James while he ruled England followed him to France in February 1689. James and his wife Mary of Modena continued to live their lives as if nothing had changed, even having another daughter, Princess Louise Marie, born in Saint-Germain in 1692. After the death of King James II in 1701, music in Saint-Germain became even more popular and flourished. Mary of Modena, James's wife, was Italian, and the Stuart court in France became a center of Italian art forms, including art, music, and courtiers that complemented the French court at Versailles. This helped spread Italian music and art throughout France as artists traveled back and forth between the two courts, from James II and his son James III's court to King Louis XIV's. The Glorious Revolution shows how important a peaceful transition of power can be, which is an important lesson to recognize today. Because the Glorious Revolution's upheaval of the English monarchy, more rights were granted to English citizens through the English Bill of Rights, which is the basis for the American Bill of Rights that is still used today and protects our basic freedoms.